Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm Tetsuo. Be sure to subscribe and click on that notification bell and share my videos with family and friends. If you have any topics or ideas you'd like for me to do, place them in the comments below. Warning, the following stories may contain trigger content. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. Now without further ado, relax and turn on your nightlights. Please enjoy this episode titled True Scary Stories, Stories of Karma. Story 1. What is a mirror? A mirror is the unwavering of what is true reality. Wishes, ideals, and self-image never reflect. It only reflects the true picture of who is standing in front of it. I used to be a calm and easygoing person. If I was to become startled or anxious, it was due to a sudden and unexpected event, an emotional fog that took away logic and reason. I've also never been what most would consider a religious man. Born into a shaman family, I spent most of my time watching my father and grandfather doing the rituals. As comforting as the feeling that something or everything has karma, there is also an outcome for everything that we do. I drifted away from any belief around the age of 16. I wouldn't consider myself an atheist. I couldn't deny that life itself was a strange thing, but the religious way of order and structure just didn't match up to the world as I knew it. I was 19 when this incident happened, and it's something that has never left me. I was a college student at St. Cloud University and just rented my first apartment. It was my first time living alone. The apartment was furnished, but missing a few essential items. I decided to go to the mall, a few miles from the apartment. At the mall, I saw this old antique shop. It had a lot of old and used things. I decided to look there because I didn't have a lot of money to spend on new things. Inside the shop, I looked around. I found a lamp that I like, but it didn't have a price tag. I approached the counter and asked the elderly man behind the counter.
$8.25,
he said. I'll take it, I replied. As I pulled out my wallet, a mirror behind the man caught my eye. A round, body-sized mirror with a black frame. Remembering that I need a mirror, this mirror would be perfect. Hey sir, how much for that mirror behind you? I asked.
$20,
he replied. Really? For that one right there? I pointed at the mirror.
Yeah, unfortunately no one buys it. It frightens customers and I just want it gone. I warn you though, reflection you see isn't always your own. You see people who have since passed on,
he told me. Oh, cool, I said, not believing in what he's saying. I should have taken the warning. I should have never asked about this mirror. That would rob me of my sanity and well-being. I paid the man, and I had a friend help me move things around the apartment. We placed the mirror not far from the door in the open area near the TV. I didn't think much about what the man at the shop had told me and talked to my friend about going out to eat after school the next day. He agreed, left, and I went to sleep. That night, I heard loud scratching from outside my bedroom. Not a sound that I was familiar with, but easy to explain. My building allowed pets, so I thought it was my neighbor's dog wanting to go outside, scratching the door. I was able to ignore it and slept throughout the night. Waking up the following morning, everything seemed fine until I went into the kitchen, which was attached to the living room. While making a bowl of noodles, I glanced at the mirror I just bought, and I saw that it was scratched up. It was something I did not see the night before, but it was dark when I brought it home. Explains why it was $20, I mumbled to myself. I walked over to see how deep the scratches were with my fingernails, but was confused when I touched it. It was as if the scratches were from the other side of the glass. I was puzzled by this, but didn't have time to investigate as I was running late for class. At school, all I could think about was what the old man at the shop had said, and the strange piece of evidence which I had not noticed until that morning. The combination left me a bit interested, although at the time I wasn't quite startled by it. However, I became more interested and willing to make a closer examination. After school, my friend and I met up for lunch at a local restaurant a few blocks from my apartment. After talking about sports and classes for a while, I decided to share my knowledge of the mirror, somewhat jokingly. We shared a laugh at the idea for a bit. However, after a few bites, he insisted that we test it. I agreed, as I didn't feel quite comfortable going back to it alone, though I still didn't believe that it possessed any of the qualities the man had spoken of. So we headed off to my apartment. I opened the door and we stepped inside. My friend glanced over at the mirror. "Man, that thing is very creepy." He laughed. "I don't know, man. For $20, it's something I had to get," I said. "If that old dude was right, see if you can get anyone to show up. Heck, maybe they can come chill with us," he said jokingly. I turned and faced the mirror, and then I said, "Yo, if anyone there wants to talk, I'm right here." Nothing happened. I felt a bit relieved and disappointed at the same time. "Aw, shoot. No dead people. What a shame. Still a cool mirror though," he said. "Yeah, at least it does look decently cool," I replied. After fooling around with the mirror for a while, we headed to class. After an hour of class, I headed back home. I walked up to my floor of the apartment, still thinking about the class material. I opened my door and stepped into my apartment. I put my keys on the table and was ready to go to bed. I turned around and I couldn't believe what I was faced with. I opened my mouth as if to scream, but no sound came out. I was in a terrified, frozen shock. What was in the mirror was no reflection of anything on this earth. A black-haired, naked figure stood inside. Its eyes were deep inside its socket, yet dark red and staring directly towards me, as if it was staring right through me. It resembled a human, both hands severed at the wrist and missing pieces of flesh on its chest, and legs were leaving visible bones and rotten, dark-looking innards. The rest of the skin was tight and gave the appearance of leather, but had a deep brownish-red color. The hair was black and rusty. All of this was enough to send a person over the edge of sanity. Yet, the characteristic that I remember the most was the mouth. Pieces of broken thread had been sewn through the torn lips, and it was open and possibly wide, like the jaw became unhinged, as if it couldn't scream loud enough, even though a faint groan was the only audible sound. It began to lift its arms, exposing jagged fragments of bones jutting from the wrist. At this point, I came out of my panic enough to reach for the door. My hand searched for the knob for what seemed like minutes, unable to avert my stare. I finally found it and stumbled out into the hall, slamming the door closed behind me and running towards the exit stairs. Once outside, I tried to explain it rationally as a skewed reflection of something in the room, but I knew it wasn't true. I began convincing myself that it was a product of thinking too much. After about 30 minutes, I mustered up enough courage to revisit my apartment, as I had nowhere else to go. I grabbed a rock from outside, climbed back up the stairs slowly, doing everything I could to persuade myself that what I had seen wasn't real. I got to my door, slid in my key, and turned the knob cautiously, fearing that what I have seen before hadn't left. As I peered in, I was at first relieved to see that the thing was no longer standing in the frame, but what replaced it led me to shatter the mirror upon sight. There, in a mix of etched glass and blood, I saw the back of my head in the mirror, and the figure in the mirror slowly turns to look at me. The figure was me. I was dead, with my lips sewn side to side. I now understand what it means to live in fear, and, in this case, die in fear. Since that night, I have been unable to enjoy any pleasures in life, and I cannot remember the last time I slept for more than a few minutes. That image haunts me in my nightmares, as well as I am awake. I have considered ending it all, but I can't, for I can't imagine the horrors. That night's visit was not an attack. It was a warning of fate from beyond. Story 2. This is a story about my cousin Mike. Mike's mom remarried shortly after Mike's dad passed away when Mike was a teenager. Mike's stepfather was always abusive towards Mike and tended to favorite his own birth son. Mike's mom often sided with her husband, and she would often physically abuse Mike to try to get him to be submissive. Whenever Mike would refuse to cater to her new husband, Mike's friend and I would often ask him why he had black and blue bruises, along with cuts and scratches on his arms. He would often just tell us that they were minor accidents. One day, Mike and his stepfather got into an argument. His stepfather grabbed a knife and threatened Mike to leave the house. His mother stood behind her husband and cursed Mike to live a poor and unfulfilling life. Mike was homeless and moved from friends to friends, and he stayed at our place for quite some time until he was able to get a place of his own. When Mike got married, his stepfather refused to help, saying that Mike wasn't his own blood son, and Mike's mom also refused to help pay for the wedding, especially the bride dowry. She stated that Mike didn't agree with her views, and he failed to do as she said. So, it was as if Mike was dead to her. Alone and scared, Mike was somehow able to borrow the money and had a decent, lonely wedding. Mike completed college, got a good job, and had a family of his own. His mom never cared to reach out to him, until one day she was dying in the hospital. She finally called him to go visit her. Mike was hesitant to go visit her, but he went anyways. When Mike got to the hospital, his mom was there, alone. She explained to him that he was her son and needed to prepare her burial and funeral in case she died. She said that her husband and stepson didn't have any money, and to be completely honest, I personally felt like they were well off, so I think her husband and stepson didn't want to spend the money on her. Anyways, Mike clarified that it was inappropriate for him to arrange her funeral, as he converted to Christianity with his wife, while his mom was still following the shaman tradition. So he believed it was her husband and her stepson's responsibility to resume the role. His mom got angry at him and started screaming and cursing at him, stating that she was the one that birthed him. If he refused to give her a good funeral and a proper burial like a son should for his mother, she'd return from the dead to drag him with her. Mike's mom has recently passed. His stepfather and the rest of his stepfather's relatives demanded that Mike help cover the funeral expenses. Mike felt that his mom wasn't there for him through his struggles, and she wasn't there for moral support when he was married. Instead, she chose to help pay for her stepson's wedding and was a mother figure to the stepson for all these years. After burying Mike's mom, Mike recently got sick. One of his uncles, who was a shaman, looked into his case and said that it was actually Mike's mom's spirit that was making him sick. She demanded from the afterlife that he fulfill his role as a son to bury her. Since Mike was a Christian, he turned to the church for help. A priest came and performed a ritual and is said to have communicated with Mike's dead mother. I'm not sure whether his mom moved on over or is stuck in limbo, but whatever the case might be, Mike is recovering from his illness. Though Mike's mom has passed, her relatives endlessly gossiped about how evil and shameless of a mother she was, to not help her son even when she was alive, and still attempted to torture her son and the afterlife too. Story 3. 22 years ago, my older brother Lou got a puppy named Spike without my parents' permission. My mom was very angry at my older brother for bringing home a puppy, but my dad didn't care as long as my brother fed and cleaned after it. Every day was an argument between my brother and my mom. My mom was always threatening Lou to get rid of this puppy because the puppy smelled and was dirty. Even though my mom would not let Spike in the house, she still argued with Lou. So Spike would stay outside majority of the time. 3 years later, towards the end of November, Lou was doing hood rat stuff and got caught. So he was sentenced to jail for a couple of years. When Lou was in jail, my mom tied Spike to a tree. Every time we gave Spike water and food, my mom would come out with a broom and hit us. She would then throw away Spike's food and water. She would tell us that it was Lou's responsibility to feed and care for Spike. She said that if she catches us feeding or playing with Spike, she would hit us like there's no tomorrow. December came, and every day got colder and colder. My sister snuck a warm blanket out to Spike to keep him warm on our morning walk to elementary school. My mom found the blanket on top of the dog, so she took it and waited until we came back from school. She confronted us to see who gave Spike the blanket, but no one confessed until she started hitting us one by one. Finally, my older sister confessed, and my mom stuffed the blanket into my sister's mouth and whipped her with the blanket so hard that it left red marks on her skin. Ever since that happened, we became scared of what would happen to us if we come in contact with Spike. Days went by, and a cold blizzard was about to hit. We begged my mom to let Spike in, until the blizzard stopped at least. But my mom kept telling us to shut up and to mind our own business. After 2 days of off and on snowfall, we went to shovel the driveway. My sister tells me to check up on Spike, and when I get there, Spike was already dead, buried in ice and snow. When I looked at Spike, I never realized how skinny he's gotten. I just dropped on my knees, slowly pet his head, and cried. What could we do? We were just kids. I then came back and told my sister that Spike was dead. I quickly guided her to Spike, and together we cried. A couple of minutes later, my dad got home. We then dug a huge hole in the backyard and buried Spike. My sister was so mad at my mom that she sat there at Spike's grave, telling him that it was my mom's fault, that he starved and froze to death. With tears running down her face, she kept saying, "We tried, Spike. We tried." After Spike's death, my mom came down with a fever that lasted a few days. After the fever, she started losing her hair and began having nightmares. According to what my dad told us, my mom would wake up in the middle of the night, sweating. Sometimes she even whimpered in her sleep, like a dog would. She had sleep paralysis on the daily ever since Spike passed away. This one time, my mom had the most insane sleep paralysis that she started hallucinating. She thought that she saw Spike in our room asking her to go with him because he needed her on trial for the way that she mistreated him when he was alive. After this hallucination, she called up a shaman and asked the woman to figure out what is happening. The shaman did her ritual and found out that my mom cannot escape her fate. The shaman lady said my mom was fated to go to some spiritual or the heavens court to fight her case for the right to live or die, and if she failed, she would face the consequences. Later on that day, my mom was too scared to fall asleep because she was afraid of what was going to happen next. However, she soon fell asleep and never woke up the next day. She passed away. My dad quickly remarried after my mom's passing. After my mom's death, my dad started having dreams about my mom begging my dad for help because she can't go to the other side. In my dad's dream, my mom said that she was in court, being judged by the heavens. Spike wasn't happy with the way he died, so he wanted my mom to pay for what she had done to him. My dad then calls up the same shaman lady, and she did a seance. After the seance, she finds out that Spike would not take any money, or any food as tribute. He held a grudge against my dead mom. The shaman lady indicated that after the trial, Spike wanted my mom to become his servant for at least 1,000 years in the afterlife, and that only after 1,000 years will she be able to reincarnate as a dog. Thanks everyone for making it to the end of this episode. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you.